there been any instance where a missing person has returned days, weeks, or even months after they've been kidnapped?
The only time in my experience that I've seen individuals kidnapped and actually return days later, it happens, but it happens across the border.
Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 35 days, and a former FBI special agent just revealed something that investigators have not said publicly, something that points to where Nancy might be right now. And once you hear it, you will not be able to unhear it. There are more than 4,000 bodies in the Arizona desert. Not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech. According to former FBI Special Agent Jen Kaffendafer, who sat down exclusively with TMZ on day 30, one of the Nancy Guthrie investigation, more than 4,000 sets of human remains have been recovered from the desert terrain surrounding Tucson in recent years alone. 4,000 people who went into that landscape and never came back out. 4,000 families waiting for an answer that, in many cases, still has not come. Because on the morning of February 1st, 2026, 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, mother of NBC Today show anchor Savannah Guthrie, a woman who had lived in Tucson for more than 5 decades, who had raised 3 children in that city, who had built a life in those Catalina foothills, disappeared from her home. And as of today, day 35, no one in law enforcement has been able to tell her family where she is, whether she is alive, or whether the investigation that was supposed to bring her home was handled in a way that gave her the best possible chance. Both of those questions lead to the same place, and this report intends to take you there. Nancy Guthrie was last seen on the evening of Saturday, January 31st. According to case records confirmed by the Pima County Sheriff's Department, she had dinner with her daughter Annie Guthrie and was dropped off at her own home by her son-in-law Tommaso Shini at approximately 9:48 p.m. Shini waited until she was inside. The garage door closed at 9:50 p.m. At 1:47 a.m., Nancy's doorbell camera disconnected. She was never seen again. When her family could not reach her the following morning, when she failed to appear for a live-streamed church service she attended most Sundays, relatives went to the home around 11 a.m. They found her personal belongings inside. Her phone, her essential items, all of it left behind. They called 911 just after noon. By the time law enforcement responded and processed what they found, blood on the front porch, confirmed by DNA testing to be Nancy's, signs of forced entry, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos was telling reporters something that has framed every subsequent development in this case. He believed Nancy Guthrie had been abducted. She did not walk from there, he said. She did not go willingly. What followed was one of the most high-profile missing persons investigations in recent American history. President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that he was deploying all resources. The FBI mobilized. Over 30,000 tips poured in. According to the former agent's TMZ interview, approximately 100 FBI agents were assigned to the case, more than were ever deployed at the peak of the Idaho 4 investigation, which had 60. A dedicated task force, drawing from both the Pima County Sheriff's Homicide Unit and the FBI's Phoenix Field Office, was assembled. The case was moved from the smaller Tucson resident agency to the full Phoenix Field Office. A significant escalation of resources, she told TMZ, that signals the FBI is treating this with the full weight of its investigative capacity. And yet, day 35, no arrest, no suspect named, no confirmed location, no proof of life. The question that former special agent put on record during her TMZ interview is one that every person following this case has a right to ask. How did someone get away with this in today's day and age, with all of the technology and surveillance at law enforcement's disposal? Her answer was precise. She told TMZ that this abduction showed the hallmarks of extensive pre-planning. The perpetrators, she assessed, chose to operate in what she described as total cover of darkness. The Catalina Foothills neighborhood operates under light restriction ordinances, meaning floodlights and external lighting are prohibited. She assessed that whoever took Nancy Guthrie was deeply familiar with the home, with the neighborhood, and with Nancy's personal habits and routines. She assessed that they likely communicated by radio rather than cell phone, specifically to avoid geofencing, the investigative technique by which law enforcement traces cellular signals to establish movement and location. She assessed that they were meticulous about fingerprint and DNA evidence from the outset. She also assessed something else, something that complicates the narrative of a perfectly executed crime. Speaking to TMZ, the former agent pointed to the figure captured on Nancy's doorbell camera footage. The individual investigators have publicly referred to as Porch Guy and identified certain characteristics she found inconsistent with a trained professional. The way the gun was positioned in the holster, she said, did not fit. The act of grabbing weeds and shrubbery to obstruct the camera struck her as unusual. She noted you could simply use your hand to accomplish the same thing. These were what she called bumbling details. They suggest, she assessed, that this was a plan executed by individuals who had done a great deal right, but who were not, in the traditional sense, professionals. So who were they? Her analysis of the entry pattern offers a detailed theory. She told TMZ that she believes entry was made through the back of the home, where locks had been changed, an act that, in her professional assessment, points to prior access or surveillance of the property. The individual captured on camera at the front door, she assessed, was performing a specific function, disabling the camera so that Nancy could be extracted through the front entrance and transferred into a vehicle with minimal risk of detection. The close proximity of the vehicle to the front entrance, she said, was deliberate. Moving an 84-year-old woman with limited mobility, documented medical records confirm she has high blood pressure, a pacemaker, and heart issues, around the perimeter of a large home risked exposure to other cameras. The operation was designed to minimize that exposure. She also pointed to something in the surveillance footage that has received relatively little attention in mainstream coverage: a small antenna, visible in what she described as a square box-shaped device, in the pocket of the individual on camera. In her assessment, this was a handheld radio, a walkie-talkie, and her reasoning is direct. You do not need a radio if you are working alone. The presence of a walkie-talkie in her professional assessment is evidence of at least one additional person coordinating the operation from another position. Division of labor, she said. One person at the back, one person at the front, possibly others at the vehicle. Multiple perpetrators, a planned entry point. A synchronized extraction. That was the most likely operational structure of the abduction in her professional assessment. And TMZ's own reporting on the Ransom communications adds another layer to that structure. A note received by TMZ claimed that Nancy Guthrie had been seen south of the border. When pressed on this directly, the former agent was measured. She told TMZ she does not believe a cartel came north specifically to take an 84-year-old woman. Particularly, she noted, at a moment when U.S. border enforcement has reached a level of intensity not seen in decades, with more people currently exiting Mexico than entering the United States. That theory, she said, does not hold. But what she did say, and what she said carefully, is that transport south of the border after the abduction is, in her words, a possibility that must be considered. She explained it plainly. You only need to flash an ID to cross into Mexico. There is no search of the vehicle. A person could be placed in a trunk, driven across, taken to a desolate location, and kept there, alive or otherwise, for an extended period. And if the worst has already happened, if Nancy Guthrie is no longer alive, the desert that begins, practically speaking, at the edge of her own neighborhood offers an equally grim alternative. She reminded TMZ of that number. 4,000 bodies recovered from the desert near Tucson in recent years. And then she said something that has stayed with everyone who heard it: it's easy to hide a body. It's easy for a body to be there for a huge length of time and never be discovered. The landscape is vast, the terrain is brutal, and she said it with the directness of someone who has spent a career in this work. If I am the abductor, that desert is exactly what I want. A body left there could go undiscovered for a very long time, perhaps permanently. That is the geography of this case. That is the physical reality that investigators are working against. But here is the twist. The theory about where Nancy Guthrie might be right now is only half the story. Because a former FBI special agent, speaking on record, revealed something that raises a question this investigation may never fully recover from. What if the people who were supposed to find Nancy Guthrie made it harder to bring her home from the very first night? There is another reality, one placed directly on the record during that interview, and it is the reality that changes everything. 4 times. Law enforcement returned to the crime scene at Nancy Guthrie's home 4 separate times. Let that settle for a moment. 4 returns. 4 separate occasions on which investigators went back to a scene they had already processed because they had missed something on the previous visit. She was explicit, walking TMZ through the sequence with the precision of someone who has spent years working crime scenes at the highest level of federal law enforcement. The former agent laid out exactly what happened. The Pima County Sheriff's Office conducted the first search. It lasted approximately 20 hours, beginning on Sunday, the day Nancy was reported missing, and continuing into Monday. According to reporting confirmed by multiple outlets including CBS News and Fox News, the crime scene was released on February 4th, just days after Nancy's disappearance. Then, approximately 3 days after the initial search, the FBI took control of the scene and conducted a second search. This is standard in a case of this magnitude, the FBI joining and reassessing with greater resources. Sheriff Nanos himself acknowledged to Fox 10 Phoenix that, in retrospect, he probably could have held off on releasing the scene before the FBI took over. He used the phrase Monday morning quarterback. He said it was a learning moment. But then came the third return. The FBI went back because they had missed a camera mounted on the roof of the home. A camera that was visible, photographable, and physically accessible from ground level, and that had not been collected during either of the first 2 searches. CBS News and Fox News both reported that FBI agents were later seen climbing onto the flat white roof of the property. They also towed Nancy Guthrie's vehicle from her garage on that same visit, another item that should, in any standard crime scene protocol, have been secured within hours of the initial response. And then came the fourth. Investigators returned again when someone CNN later confirmed it was a forensic consultant who had advised the investigation, pointed out that the property had a septic tank that had not been searched. Overhead footage aired by Fox News showed investigators removing the manhole cover at the rear of the property, probing the tank with a long stick, and using a flashlight to peer inside. Day 8 of the investigation. The septic tank at the residence of an abduction victim, searched for the first time on day 8. 4 times. Law enforcement returned to that crime scene 4 times. Before we continue, if you are watching this right now, drop in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. We have people following this case from all over the world, and every time we cover Nancy Guthrie, that comment section fills up with people who are just as invested in finding answers as we are. Let us know where you are. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. We are going to keep following this case until there is an answer. Now, back to what those 4 returns actually mean for this investigation. Retired FBI Special Agent Ken Gray, speaking to Fox 10 Phoenix, framed the legal implications in terms a defense attorney will almost certainly revisit if this case ever reaches trial. When a crime scene is released and later redeclared, he said, anything introduced after that point becomes evidentially compromised. The gap in control, the period during which the scene was no longer secured, creates a window. Evidence could, in theory, have been planted or removed. He was not saying that happened. He was saying that a competent defense attorney will argue that it could have, and that the inability to definitively refute that argument weakens the prosecution's case. Aaron Cross, president of the Pima County Deputies Association, went further. He told the New York Post that the initial handling of the scene looked unprofessional. He said that reporters had been walking up to the property, in effect, contaminating what should have been an airtight evidence perimeter, and that it did not look good for the department. Speaking to TMZ, the former agent said that if she had been in charge from the beginning, that crime scene would still be closed. She said she would have kept the media several blocks away. She would have established a single controlled entry path for investigators, attorneys, and anyone else with legitimate access, to ensure that any transfer of material happened in a documented corridor outside the primary scene. She would have maintained a separate command post for law enforcement, positioned on the opposite side of the property from media, to prevent any possibility of leaks or contamination. She called what actually happened 4 searches, an early release, a missed rooftop camera, a missed vehicle, a missed septic tank, a field day for a defense attorney. That phrase deserves weight, because what the former agent is describing is not a minor procedural misstep. She is describing a series of failures at the most foundational level of crime scene management in a case where an 84-year-old woman's life may hang in the balance. Every item missed on the first search was an item that spent additional time in a compromised evidentiary state. Every hour the scene was unsecured was an hour that, in a courtroom, will be scrutinized by someone whose job is to create reasonable doubt. And Savannah Guthrie, who stepped away from her duties as NBC Today co-anchor, who suspended coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics to be with her family, who has posted video after video to social media asking whoever took her mother to make contact, to provide proof of life, to simply show that Nancy is still alive. Savannah Guthrie has said publicly that her mother may already be gone. Each day that passes, the former agent told TMZ, there is less and less chance that Nancy Guthrie will ever be found alive. That is a direct quote from a former federal agent with extensive experience in cases exactly like this one. It is not speculation. It is a professional assessment grounded in decades of investigative work. The first 24 to 48 hours of a missing person case like this are not just critical, they are, in her own words, everything. And those hours were spent on a crime scene that was processed incompletely, released prematurely, and returned to 3 additional times for items that should have been secured on day 1. There are things that give investigators reason for measured optimism. The former agent told TMZ she believes this case will be solved because of the footage that Google and the FBI jointly extracted from the hard drives at Nancy's home. Footage recovered without cloud storage from residual data in back-end systems, a technical achievement that FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed publicly on X. That footage shows a face. Not fully, but enough. The eyebrows, she said. The mustache. The lips. The skin tone. The distinctive way this person dresses. The specific brands he gravitates toward, the Ozark Trail backpack sold at Walmart. The particular holster configuration. Someone, she said, knows exactly who this person is. Someone who has seen this face in the morning, at dinner, in a car, in a house. And that person, she believes, will eventually come forward. Genetic genealogy may also prove decisive. The DNA recovered from the glove found near Nancy's home, assessed as matching the type worn by Porch Guy in the surveillance footage, returned no match from CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, which holds millions of profiles from convicted offenders and crime scene evidence across the country. But CODIS only covers individuals who have previously been arrested for qualifying offenses or who have voluntarily submitted samples. It does not cover the tens of millions of Americans who have submitted DNA to consumer ancestry services like 23andMe or Ancestry.com. Speaking to TMZ, the former agent said the FBI can obtain access to those databases through court order, and that genetic genealogy, the same technique that ultimately identified the suspect in the Idaho 4 case, could be the mechanism that breaks this one open. She also noted that the case has been moved to the FBI's Phoenix field office, the full field office, not the smaller Tucson resident agency. With that comes significantly expanded resources, more analysts capable of processing the enormous volume of digital evidence, more agents to physically run down the 30,000-plus leads that have come in, and the institutional weight of a major FBI field operation behind the investigation. She described it as drinking from a fire hose, and said she believes law enforcement knows considerably more than the public has been told. The FBI has also confirmed contact with Mexican authorities. News Nation, which first reported this development, confirmed through a source with knowledge of the activity that the Bureau has reached out to its counterparts south of the border. The Pima County Sheriff's Department declined to confirm the details, but the outreach itself signals that the border transport theory outlined in that TMZ interview has not been dismissed by investigators. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos told NBC News that investigators are, in his words, definitely closer. He said they have a lot of intel and a lot of leads, and that it is now simply time to go to work. He has said publicly, on multiple occasions, that he personally believes Nancy Guthrie is still alive. Whether that belief is grounded in intelligence the public has not been shown, or whether it reflects the posture law enforcement adopts in an active missing persons case to preserve the integrity of the investigation, is not something that can be determined from the outside. What can be determined, what the record clearly shows, is that 35 days after an 84-year-old woman was taken from her home in the middle of the night, the desert that surrounds Tucson is still holding its silence. The ransom deadlines have passed. The glove DNA came back without a match. The suspect on the doorbell footage has not been identified publicly, and a former FBI special agent, speaking on the record, has said that the crime scene at the center of this investigation was handled in a way that could compromise whatever prosecution may eventually follow. 4 times. Law enforcement returned to that crime scene 4 times. And somewhere out there, in a desert that has already swallowed 4,000 people, or across a border that requires only an ID and an unlocked trunk, or in a room that no one has thought to look in yet, Nancy Guthrie, a woman who has lived in Tucson for more than 50 years, who has a daughter who loves her publicly and desperately, who has a pacemaker and high blood pressure and limited mobility, is either waiting to be found or has already passed beyond the reach of anyone still looking. So here is the question this case leaves open. If the people tasked with finding Nancy Guthrie missed a rooftop camera, missed her vehicle, missed a septic tank, what else have they missed? And is whatever they missed still out there, waiting to be found? Or did the window already close on the night they released that crime scene? Nobody has answered that, not the FBI, not the Pima County Sheriff's Office, not anyone. And until they do, Nancy Guthrie is still missing. If you have any information about Nancy Guthrie's whereabouts or her disappearance, contact the FBI directly at 1-800-CALL-FBI. That is 1-800-225-5324. Tips can be submitted anonymously. The Guthrie family is offering a $1 million reward for information that directly leads to her recovery, paid consistent with FBI reward criteria. If this story raised questions for you, and it should, the best thing you can do right now is share it. Not for the channel, for Nancy. Every set of eyes on that surveillance footage is another chance that someone somewhere recognizes a walk, a holster, a backpack, a face. Savannah Guthrie has said it herself. Someone out there knows who this person is. We will continue following this case as it develops. If you are new here, this is Case Within, where we go beyond the headline, follow the evidence, and ask the questions that don't always get asked. Subscribe so you don't miss our next report, and drop in the comments, What do you think happened to Nancy Guthrie? The conversation there is always worth reading.